Hello everyone, I'm Professor Geek. Welcome back to my channel. Today I want to talk about Batman number 53, recently out. And I wasn't going to cover this issue. I felt that I had sufficiently covered the arc of Bruce Wayne on jury duty and said my piece about what Tom King is doing with the character right now. But then this controversy over the issue labeling Batman as an atheist arose, so I wanted to look into the issue for myself and then address that. I'll sum up my take on this and then I'll get into the details, which explains it a bit better. I know a lot of people read that Screen Rant article that talked about this issue establishing Batman as an atheist and were outraged by that. And I would have been too had I just read the Screen Rant article, but I read the actual issue and I don't think that article was accurate. I don't think it interpreted this issue correctly. I don't believe this issue is establishing him as an atheist now. He's talking about his past, and I'll go into that in a moment. But what Tom King is doing with this issue is a problem, I think. So I'll talk about those two things. Why would it be a problem for Batman to be an atheist, and then what I think is wrong with the direction of this issue. First of all, I've talked about these issues for a while now, and I haven't really mentioned the art. I'm a story guy, so I go straight to story. Art is kind of secondary for me, but I think it's important to note that with all of the problems I have with the story, the art has been beautiful. Lee Weeks and then Elizabeth Breitweiser's colors, the combination of those two really evokes for me the look of the old Legends of the Dark Knight, the Denny O'Neil run that began after the Batman '89 film came out and was so popular, and they actually started a new title just for Batman because the character was so popular at that point. It really puts me in mind of the look of those issues, at least the early ones that came out. So the art is great, and the coloring is wonderful. It's just the story here. Like I said, I don't think the issue is actually making Batman an atheist, but let me address what the problem would be with that, because people have outrage from different angles of that. No, it's ridiculous for Batman to be an atheist. I know some people want to make him an atheist. They want to think he's always been an atheist. It's so obvious that he would be an atheist because he's cool and he's rational, and they're really projecting their own values and insecurities into the character. Batman doesn't exist in our world, so whatever you might think is the rational belief or lack thereof in reality does not apply to Batman because he lives in the DC universe. No, Batman is not by any means a church-going, Bible-reading Christian by any means. He's far too obsessed with his mission and far too dedicated to observe any sort of religion, really. But there's a big difference between being an atheist and not being very religious. Batman is all about logic. He's all about deduction, reason. He lives in a universe in which he's met the Spectre. He's met, in many tellings, the Greek gods themselves. He knows about the new gods. He knows about Zatanna and the mystical universe and the mystical realm and all of this. There's absolutely no way that he would be an atheist. The issue doesn't even have to be addressed, but if it were to be addressed, he would most probably be some sort of agnostic. Not to any one set religion, but certainly not burying his head so far in the sand of the DC universe to think that there's nothing out there beyond the material. That's just absurd. That's already been disproven over and over again in the DC universe. So people would be right to be outraged about that. I don't think the issue is setting him up that way, though, and I'll explain why. That Screen Rant article showed a few panels, and the ones that it showed, it was very misleading. And then it talks about Bruce Wayne saying that Batman is their real god, and he's the god of his. This is a real misrepresentation. Bruce Wayne is bringing up the topic of religion because he sees one of his fellow jurors wearing a cross, so he brings up the idea of belief in a god and faith and whatnot, and he's tying this into his reasoning for wanting to vote not guilty for Victor Fries. And he doesn't talk about himself right now. He talks about himself at the moment his parents died, and he gives a little bit of his journey up to now, but never at any point does he definitively say, so as of right now, I do not believe in any sort of gods out there. He couldn't say that because he knows gods out there. He certainly couldn't do that. I'll even read you a bit of his story here, and I'm not reading the entire issue, I'm just reading the brief monologue here. He says, my father was a Christian, and that makes sense. The Waynes probably would have been Anglican or some sort of high church Protestant in a city like Gotham. He held hallow the immortal soul, heaven, the Father, and the Son, giving your will to your Lord, trusting him with that will. He wanted me to believe too, but he wanted me to come to it on my own. We went to church, he told me all the stories, talked a lot about what we can control, what we can't. Later, after, after their death, I was upset. I put aside believing in a deity or believing in anything my father thought had saved him. I couldn't really see that anything had saved him. I left Gotham for a while. This is all completely natural for a child having witnessed that. I searched for something solid to put my faith in, and this is all true. Batman's search to train and everything, and he does go and study many philosophies as well as the science and physical training. I asked a great deal of questions, I paid for some answers, but I didn't find anything out there as far as I went, so I came home. This is all solid. The imagery even evokes, there's one point where he's in this jacket that I swear I've seen him in the Legends of the Dark Knight series too, because that series took place with a very early Batman just starting out. So I do appreciate the imagery being evoked there. He says, and I waited for something to find me. And of course, we who know the Batman lore know that something did find him. He was sitting in his study. The classic comic book renders it this way anyway. And he's sitting in his study thinking, what image should I take? How should I go about striking fear into the hearts of criminals? And then the bat crashes through his window. And that's the bat coming to him, so to speak. He says, we're all here because of this city. We're citizens of this city. We all care enough not to throw out our summons, enough to come here and to sit through and decide this. And if you're a citizen of Gotham, then you know this is a place for monsters, demons. And there he is. Every shadow is met, every horror put down. As citizens of Gotham, we watch as he beats back the bullies. We see our brothers rescued, our sisters returned. A man with a bat on his chest keeps us safe. And he goes on, and the idea is that we look to him as though he were a god. The fact that we're all just wanting to blindly trust Batman in this jury room shows that, and that's not logical. Bruce Wayne is trying to show that. Now, I don't mind that Bruce Wayne is trying to find Victor Freeze not guilty in this, because he obviously knows that he was duped by someone. I don't know if he knows it's Bane yet, but obviously he was played in this instance to be very brutal with Mr. Freeze and force him to confess and then have this all come out in a public way. This is part of the Bane breaking down the Batman that Tom King wants to show. So I don't have a problem with the atheist comment. I don't think that's to reflect where he is right now. When he says, I used to believe in God, I think that's the Christian God. And no, Batman wouldn't necessarily believe in anyone named God. So I don't have a problem with that. I don't have a problem with him trying to find Victor Freeze not guilty. What I have a problem with is this overall story arc, the idea that we've got to break Batman down. Tom King is desperate to get Batman psychologically back to the place he was as a child watching his parents killed in front of him. That's what trauma does to you when it's not properly emotionally processed. When you're triggered, you are suddenly back in that moment. You're back at that age, you're back in that geographical location, you're back in those fears and sensations and all of that. That's what PTSD is. And that's why triggers are so horrible. You're back in the moment of that trauma because it's never been effectively processed in your mind. And Tom King is trying to, in this overall arc, say that Catwoman leaving Batman has placed him back at that moment of watching his parents murdered in front of him, in the sense that everything he thought he believed in is now taken away from him. The world and the rules and the values and everything that he thought he believed in as a child, of course, that's completely obliterated when you see your parents killed, of course. And now he's saying that's happened to Batman again now with Catwoman. My problem with this as a story is that it's a cheap approach to a Batman story. We have had story after story after story already that tears Batman down, that breaks him down and gets him back to his basics so he can find his way back and rebuild himself. Enough! Again, the deconstruction thing here, that storytellers are so unimaginative and so lazy that they just latch onto that. And I think, in addition, what was happening here in Tom King's case, as I've talked about before with his intent for the heroes in crisis, is that he is trying to work out his own trauma with this Batman run. He is certainly projecting. He apparently, as he's said in his own words, dealt with PTSD and the CIA traumas and stuff like that he's known throughout his career, and he's using the character of Batman to work that out. No, sir. No. When you're signed to the Batman title, he's not yours to do with as you please for a while. No, he's still the iconic character of Batman that belongs to culture. You are the guardian of that folklore. A lot of you is going to pour into the character in your stories just naturally if you're doing it correctly. But how about a few filters here, guy? Can you stop pouring out every bit of your inner turmoil into a character that we've already seen this done to time and time again? It's cliche. There's nothing original about this approach. The Catwoman marriage thing is new, but that was just clearly a device. That was a contrivance just to get at Batman's psychological breakdown here. This is not good envisioning of a story. It's not a good idea for Batman. It's tired and done to death. So that is my problem with issue 53 of Batman. I do like the fact that he's back in his original costume, but I don't like the fact that he's doing it so he can find out who he is again and rebuild himself. It's kind of like writing a new Cyborg arc and having him deal with the trauma of being half man and half machine, and is he still human? And we've done that. We've seen that done 1,000 times over. Can we have something different? But this is Tom King's trauma. These are his personal issues, and he's determined to have Batman work them out for him. And to have the entire freaking DCU work it out for him in Heroes in Crisis. But that's all I'll say about this. I'll be back again tomorrow, like I said, for a live stream, 10 p.m. Eastern. We'll talk about some other comic and movie, television news and whatnot. But until then, keep enjoying and digging deeper into the hero stories you love. Thanks for watching.